Happy Wednesday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. I'm glad to have you with us. Very busy show for us coming up. As promised, we'll have Connor Riley on today's program, but special guest right off the top, the great former Georgia Bulldog, terrific ESPN analyst, very outspoken, who's got a big event coming up later on this summer that he wants you to know about. Let's talk to David Pollack right off the top of the program today. In fact, what do you say we get it started? As I said before, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harris Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
It is a little bit unusual for us to start the show with a guest, but that is certainly our plan here today. In just a couple of moments, I'm going to welcome in the great former Georgia Bulldog, the terrific ESPN analyst, a part of the set there for ESPN's College Game Day, and a guy who's been a part of some of the great memories in this program's history. David Pollack going to join us here coming up in just a couple of moments. There's a lot I want to talk to you about with David. Of course, he's also got a big event that he wants to make sure, I want to make sure we tell you about for him, something he's doing for a terrific cause later on this summer. But obviously, you know, a lot related to the start of spring practice and a lot of fun stuff going on around the Georgia program right now. So with all of that in mind, let's get ready to say hello right now to, as I said before, the terrific former Georgia Bulldog, a guy who's just doing a great job on ESPN each and every Saturday during the season. David Pollack, welcome back to DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. I certainly appreciate you being with us.
BA, what's up, my man?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to have you here, and I hope that you're doing well, enjoying your off season. I don't think we've talked to you since the season ended. You know, your show is such a big thing with the crowds and the energy and the stuff like that. What was that like this year without that element involved? How weird was it just doing your job in 2020?
It was definitely different. Just getting on campus, taking a test and having to stay in your room the whole time, and not being able to socialize with your dudes. Like, we usually get over there for Saturday morning, usually get over there about, 6:30, and, you're there early, you're there in the same room, chilling, getting ready for the show. Friday you're over there doing meetings together, busting chops, having fun for the whole day, basically, going over everything, and, all that stuff was done remotely, so that was strange. And then you throw on top of that the fans and the elements that usually it brings energy. It brings a different. It's what makes our show. So it's definitely unique, different, presented different challenges. I tell you this though, once the show started, and you can relate to this, Brandon, it's the show.
Right.
You don't think about that kind of stuff. You just focus and you do your job. But I definitely, along with everybody else in the show, would welcome back the fans.
So one of the things that we've talked about on this show over the course of the last year or so is going back to before Jamie Newman even enrolled at UGA. You had been a fan of his. You were kind of a believer that Dwan Mathis had a chance to do some good things. But now Georgia has settled in with JT Daniels. He obviously played well at the end of last season. As you go into the start of this upcoming year, how set and settled do you think Georgia is at quarterback? And do you think UGA is now ready to join these high-powered offenses that seem to dominate so much of the rest of the national conversation across the sport?
I think if you watch Georgia, you feel strong about it. JT showed a ton of different things. To me, a couple things I think that surprised me about JT, his pocket feel was really good. His athleticism, even though he had surgery, was able to make people miss and still make plays. But I think processing information, getting the ball out of his hands, giving his guys chances to make plays, no surprise, obviously, that Pickens starts to become a baller again and get more targets. And so I think that, everything you saw from him, I think Jamie Newman would have been ridiculous. It would have been an awesome addition. Dwan obviously couldn't get it together upstairs. I think if you're a Georgia fan now, you go, we got our guy. You lose a ton of guys on defense now, and you have to rebuild a little bit. But let's be honest of what football is nowadays. If you don't have a quarterback, you can have the best defense in the world. You better have that dude at the position, and Georgia has that with JT.
How much do you think it helps to, and this is a no-brainer question, but how much do you think it helps to now give this group a spring practice, something they didn't have a year ago? Most programs are in a similar situation, but for, second-year offensive coordinator, first full season starting quarterback, giving those guys a chance to go through a spring practice, which is about to begin, how much does that matter for UGA right now?
It matters for everybody. I'll say this, the shocking thing that blew me away last year was that offenses weren't behind more than they were. Last year, offenses came out and destroyed college football and didn't seem like they missed a beat, maybe even got better. So I think spring football will help everybody across the country. It helps everybody with your depth and knowing what you have. But specifically for JT, too, just remember, he had surgery, and then JT didn't have a home. He didn't have a team. He wasn't with USC anymore. He was looking for a future. So he wasn't really rehabbing in a pandemic, and so I think him rehabbing, get better, getting acclimated with the guys around him, learning what they like to do, what they don't like. I'll be honest, dude, Arian Smith and Darnell Washington and Pickens and Kearse Jackson, and I mean, my God, bro, I would want to go ahead and play 7-on-7 every day. I mean, he's got weapons palooza, not on top of running back, on top of running back, on top of running back, and so I think this offense needs to join the elite for Georgia to get where it wants to get. If Georgia wants to make their dreams come true about winning the national championship, 2nd and 7 isn't a passing down anymore. You have to be willing to chuck the ball all over the field and say, we're going to average, 40 points a game, because that's what the great offenses, the great teams winning championships of the last several years have done.
You've got a big event coming up this summer. I want to make sure folks know about that. Let me squeeze in one more thing before we get there. On the other side of the ball for a moment, obviously when you were at UGA, you were a great pass rusher. And, if you look at Georgia last year, I think pretty quietly this team got better from a pass rushing standpoint. But, David, I would also suggest that getting after quarterbacks even more for Georgia in 2021 is almost just as important to me as the offensive upgrade that needs to go on. You see a lot of these national championship level programs collecting those 40-plus sacks, and that's kind of a fixture for defenses in this age when it's hard to stop people, so you got to get those negative plays. First of all, would you join me in saying that is a next step for Georgia, maybe even more true this upcoming year, given the fact there's some questions related to the defensive secondary?
I think what you just said at the end there is important. When you have guys in the secondary with less experience, you definitely better have guys that can get after the quarterback. And Adam Anderson showed me spurts where he looked phenomenal. I mean, he looked ridiculous. Aziz leaving, obviously, if you don't think pass rush is important, go watch the Cincinnati game.
Yeah.
I mean, he dominated that football game, and probably the reason the most that Georgia won. So, Nolan Smith, and listen, all the young guys. Georgia's done a great job in recruiting. You watch the guys, that have rotated in and out throughout the last couple years, 100%. It's about affecting the quarterback. It's about creating negative plays, creating turnovers. You're not going to stop people consistently anymore. Those days are gone. So you have to create those negative plays, create those turnovers, get the ball back to your offense. And that will be the biggest step next year when you're breaking in all those DBs. And I think it'll be interesting to see philosophically too, is how much more aggressive you get when you got a really good offense on the other side of the ball. Do you want to bring more pressure, bring more heat, which allows more sacks, more negative plays.
All right, let's make sure we make folks aware of this great event coming up this summer. It's June 28th, the date. It's the Georgia Club, beautiful golf course right there in the Athens area. The Pollack Family Foundation Celebrity Golf Classic. It benefits Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. David, I hope this isn't sold out yet because I want our audience to have a chance to be a part of that. There's also some sponsorship opportunities going on here as well for the people who want to get involved with that. Would you mind just telling folks a little bit about what's going to happen this June there at the Georgia Club? A great event for a great cause?
Yeah, I appreciate you letting me share. Listen, we've been doing it for the last several years, 5 years actually, but the pandemic stopped one. And just to give you some people that will be there, like, Vince Dooley to Jim Donnan to Mark Richt to Kirby Smart and, David Green and DJ Shockley and Aaron Murray and just a ton of guys, a ton of Georgia guys all throughout. And then we'll throw in some NFL guys and Matt Schaub and some baseball guys. We've had Ryan Howard, and we've had a bunch of guys come out over the last several years. And you basically buy a foursome, and all the proceeds go to the Pollack Family Foundation and Children's Healthcare. Strong for Life is the program that it goes to.
Okay.
It's a program that does a lot of great different things, but one of the things that we do the best, I think, is doing a camp in Winder for kids that are, that are a little overweight, that need to learn how to do things, and that learn how to cook and learn how to eat correctly, learn how to they all kinds of stuff, zip line, bike, and you'd be amazed about how much success stories we've had with kids, coming to that camp and realizing. But you basically get to come play golf with a celebrity, be around a bunch of the, Georgia football family and a bunch of other guys, have a great day, get fed like kings, and support a great cause.
Boy, that's awesome, David. If people want to find out more about this, I know I got a lot of information at Pollack FF, which is the Pollack Family Foundation Twitter account, has a link to the tournament. Where else would you send folks if they want to find out more about how they can get involved, whether it's as a sponsor or as a signing up for one of the golf foursomes or something like that? Where else can people go to find out more about this?
Yeah, that would be a great place to start. You can also go to the Pollack Family Foundation website, and you can learn more about our golf tournament, what we've done in the past. And then if you want to reach out any form of social media with the PFF, Pollack Family Foundation, or me, and support in any way you want to. And if you don't, that's fine. If you like golf, I'm not the biggest golf fan in the world, but I'll do it for a great cause. So.
Well, David, it's great to see you on ESPN each and every week. You're doing a great job there. And I tell you, as someone who lives in this area, it's great to have you out there doing great work in our community. Obviously, as I said before, helping folks who may have, especially children who've gotten a little overweight, to figure out a way to kind of, rebuild their life and make a new plan for success. That's just an awesome thing to hear about. I appreciate the work that you're doing there for that. Thanks for being with us here on our show today, and I look forward to getting a chance to speak to you soon.
All right, Brandon. Good to talk to you.
Good stuff there from David Pollack, great former Georgia Bulldog. As I said before, you can find David on Twitter, David Pollack on Twitter. That's very easy to do. Or at Pollack FF on Twitter. That'll get you a link to the Pollack Family Foundation. Or just simply go to their website, the Pollack Family Foundation there. We'll give you all the details with the golf tournament coming up June 28th, right there at the Georgia Club, just outside of Athens in the Watkinsville area. Unbelievable celebrity appearances by former dogs, a whole bunch of fun there. David Pollack doing some terrific stuff in the community, and it was great to have him as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort today. So we're off and running here. Great way to get things started with David Pollack. Very, very provocative statements and opinions there on the Georgia Bulldogs. We'll react to some of that here coming up. Before that, let me remind you that I am Brandon Adams. It's good to have you with us here today. As I said before, DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort today. All kinds of video platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Thanks for tuning in on all of them. The podcast platforms there as well. Of course, with our friends on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. Just always a great pleasure to be a part of all of this with you, and still enjoying that very nice, I guess you'd call this pre-spring weather. Not quite spring yet, but spring is on the way. The weather has been beautiful. It gets you thinking about getaways, and of course, great one for you coming up here. Just a 2-hour drive from Atlanta at either the Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort properties, whether it be the Harrah's Cherokee Valley River or the original Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Gaming floor totally reimagined to take social distancing into account. Gourmet dining options, which are totally delicious. Some fantastic restaurant choices, which any good getaway should truly have. Shopping experiences, world-class. A luxurious spa is there for you there as well. It's all available at Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. The sports book, I was just looking into this the other day. They are getting close to open. We don't quite have a firm date on exactly when that's going to take place yet, but pretty soon, sports gaming is coming to the mountains of western North Carolina. Can't wait for that. Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. But really the best thing you can do to kind of stay up to date on everything that's going on, but also become Caesars Rewards member and take advantage of all the great incentives that Harrah's offers you. Go to the website you see on your screen, or if of course you're listening radio podcast, it's Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee. Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee. That'll get you in touch with Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Busy show for us coming up. It is Connor Riley here in just a couple of minutes' time. Before that, though, let me go around the doghouse. I want to recap some of the stuff that David Pollack was saying there. First of all, let me tell you something you already know, that, listen, I'm a Georgia partisan. You can call me a homer if you want. I don't mind that. That's fine. I am someone who wants Georgia to thrive. I want UGA to do well. And do not discount the role that former UGA people, men and women, that move on to the sports media, do not discount the role they play in helping the brand of Georgia just kind of grow and thrive. Listen, it's no coincidence that if you look at the two major NFL analysts on both CBS and Fox right now, they're both Dallas Cowboys quarterbacks. Big brands lead to big media personalities, and it just kind of makes the brand of the former team even bigger. When you have a David Pollack who has that UGA credentials as one of the ESPN Game Day hosts, that's obviously good for David personally, but I believe it's also good for Georgia because that's his alma mater. You'll say the same thing about Maria Taylor, and you want to talk about Elle Duncan, who's obviously a big Georgia fan, and some of those people that kind of move into that role. That just makes Georgia a little bit bigger. So I love seeing these former dogs doing well in the media business, David Pollack included there. Also, as Georgia gets ready to begin spring practice, we're going to talk to Connor Riley a little bit more about some of this in a moment. If you want to have optimism about the upcoming season, most Georgia fans do. If you want to have that optimism, David Pollack, certainly in the interview that you just heard a moment ago, and if you're listening radio or video, you kind of tune in. Hopefully you were tuned in time to hear this. If not, go back and listen to the full show. You can hear more of it. But David Pollack certainly gives you permission to feel optimistic about what's going to happen for Georgia this upcoming fall on both sides of the ball. A lot of nice things to say about JT Daniels and the wide receivers that Daniels is working with. You're to mention Arian Smith by name to go along with George Pickens and some of the other mainstays. On defense, mentioning him Adam Anderson by name as one of those guys who has a chance to really explode onto the scene this year. Really fun to think about what Georgia may look like this fall through the lens of a guy who knows. Who played at this program, a guy who covers this program now. Really strong stuff from David Pollack a moment ago. So let's try to keep the momentum for our show going right now. For more on the start of UGA spring practice and kind of everything else that's happened over the course of the last couple of days, and a fairly substantial recruiting note as well, let's bring on Connor Riley now, DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
So, Connor, before we kind of get going on everything else, do you agree with what I said there a moment ago, that if you're someone who wants the Georgia brand to be as big as it can, former dogs thriving in media is, I think, an important step in all of that? And, to see David doing as well as he is around ESPN and, just really a big personality there on the game day set, I think that helps Georgia a little bit.
So I don't count in that, right?
Well, you do. I mean, of course you do. Of course you. We'll count you as a former dog in the media there as well.
Yeah, no, but I think your point about Dallas Cowboys quarterbacks, and another one recently just got paid in Dak Prescott.
That's
I'm
right.
sure when he walks away, someone will say, "Hey, Dak, come be in our radio booth." I think it's a great point there, and it certainly helps that you have a David Pollack, a Maria Taylor that have that kind of visibility. I think back to when LSU won the national title in 2019. ESPN had Ryan Clark and Marcus Spears on talking every single Monday about LSU, and that sort of, I think, helped the popularity with that team and sort of helped grow that brand there. And so if Georgia ultimately is able to go on a similar run to like what LSU did that season, you're probably going to see similar types of content, and I think that's only going to help Georgia grow the brand.
And in fairness to David, he's going to do more than just cover UGA.
Right.
He's not there just to evangelize for UGA's cause. We certainly understand that. He's got the entire country that he's got to cover when it comes to college football. But that doesn't mean that Georgia still can't benefit from his presence, even in kind of a more objective role now as the host of that game day show.
Right, and I don't think you'd see David Pollack go up there and say, after Georgia theoretically beats Alabama, say, we went into Bryant-Denny Stadium and we dropped 45 points on them. You're not going to see him banging the table that way. But, it helps with the visibility of this program. I think it certainly has a cachet itself with players. These guys follow the sport. They know who David Pollack is. They know who Maria Taylor is. And I do sort of think it all helps rise the tide of the Georgia brand.
Well, this is very inside, but I'll say it nonetheless. It always like kind of funny. When Maria Taylor, who was doing sidelines to the Rose Bowl, interviewed Kirby Smart after the game, and when the interview was done, she's like, "Congratulations, Coach." And he's like slapping him in the back saying, "This is good for you too." And in my mind, of course, she's smiling, but I'm thinking, if you're Maria Taylor, who has never hid from the fact that she went to UGA, I think she's a proud alumnus, But in that moment, I'm sure she's probably thinking, actually, Coach, I'm trying to do my job right now. I'm trying not to get a bunch of hate mail from Oklahoma fans or whoever else. But Kirby obviously just kind of lost the moment. It was like, hey, this is good for you too right here. You went to Georgia as well. So I always thought that moment from Kirby with Maria Taylor was always really funny.
Yeah, usually you wait to either leave the press box or for the red light to stop recording before you give a little fist pump there to celebrate your alma mater winning a Rose Bowl.
No, that's exactly right, for sure. All right, let me transition to some of the stuff we just heard from Pollack. And, you've written a lot about this at DawgNation.com there as well. We are on the doorstep of spring practice beginning. I think there are a lot of very interesting storylines here. A guy that I talked about on yesterday's show that you also wrote about, a guy like, say, Darnell Washington, for instance, big potential step forward for him. I thought it was interesting a moment ago, to hear, David mention Adam Anderson by name, when I think you and I have both been kind of interested. Okay, what does Nolan Smith bring to the table for Georgia, both this spring and this fall? So just kind of give me your thumbnail sketch of kind of what you're most interested in as Georgia gets ready to get rolling here with spring practice here coming up very soon.
So if there's a player that I am most interested in, it's actually one you just didn't name right there. It is Jamari Sawyer and what happens with him both this spring and going into fall, because I think right now you'd probably say Jamari is Georgia's best offensive lineman.
I would think you'd say that, yes.
You'd feel comfortable with him if he was Georgia's starting left tackle.
You would certainly feel like you were solid at the position if that was the case.
However, I think you and I both agree Georgia's ceiling is at its highest if Jamari is your starting left guard and somebody else wins that starting left tackle job to where they feel comfortable enough to move Jamari inside.
Yep.
So how Jamari and where Jamari ends up playing this spring is going to be really sort of telling to me how this offensive line develops and whether or not Georgia has that sort of left tackle ready to step in and allow Jamari to kick down a guard where I think he might be a better player.
And I asked this question to John Stinchcomb when he joined us on Monday, the great former Georgia offensive lineman. When Matt Luke praises his versatility, is that real? Not his, by his, I mean his offensive line's versatility, not just Salyer's versatility, although certainly Jamari's versatility is a big part of this. I asked John, is this just coach speak, not wanting to put guys in certain slots yet or let people like me speculate about who's going in what slot? Or is the versatile nature of this offensive line truly a strength right now? And I have to admit, Connor, I'm not quite so sure about that. I liked what Matt Luke said last week, but in terms of really feeling like you know who that five's going to be, I can't quite tell what Luke thinks about that as of yet.
As someone who has been called DawgNation sort of jack of all trades, master of none, it's a strength to have that depth and that versatility until you absolutely need a left tackle to block the other team's best pass rusher, until you need a guard that's able to move an opposing defensive tackle. I think when it comes to versatility and the ability to have multiple guys who can do multiple things for you, it's nice when you're able to have that flexibility and move guys around, especially with injuries over the course of the season. But if you're asking me, a former offensive lineman, which I would rather have, I'd rather have five guys that I know are going to be able to lock down their positions and be studs at that spot more so than having the ability to plug and move guys around if things aren't going great.
So here's where my mind goes in all of this. If you struggled at left tackle, that'd be enough to get you beat against Clemson, because Clemson's obviously going to exploit that because they have been good along that defensive line and in the front seven for really the last several years, expecting to be a strength once again right now. So you almost wonder, okay, so if there's a transition for Georgia, does it happen during the season? Because, listen, once you get past Clemson, you can play pretty much anybody you want to.
Right.
I mean, you're going to have freedom to do a lot of different things. But and I've said before, I'm not going to give up on Xavier Truss because he struggled in the Peach Bowl. But as an example, Truss did struggle in the Peach Bowl. If you put a left tackle over there that was green and had not played against Clemson, you're not probably overcoming that to the tune of a victory because of how good Clemson is in that defensive front and how much that could impact the rhythm of what Georgia wants to try to be able to do offensively.
Right. You just heard David Pollack say it. He thinks Georgia won the Peach Bowl not solely, but a big reason why was because of Azeez Ojulari and the impact he had in that game. And sort of looking ahead to that Clemson game, other than maybe Brenton Cox, I think Miles Murphy might be the best pass rusher, best defensive end pass rusher Georgia's going to see all season. And that's not something you want to put a green or a guy you're not totally confident in at that left tackle spot. And we've seen this before where you think back to the 2016 season opening game against North Carolina, certainly I think a losable game with, at the time, Mitch Trubisky at the quarterback there for North Carolina. Georgia goes out, they start Grayson Lambert for that first game. They rotate Jacob Eason in a little bit, but when it was winning time, Lambert was in there. And then the next week against Nichols, Eason becomes the starter full-time, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if they say for game 1, hey, Jamari, you're going to be our left tackle, but then game 2, we're going to move somebody else in there and kick you down to guard.
Does Justin Schaefer have a starting spot right now?
Right now, yes. Game 1, game 5, game 11 or 12, we'll see. I think you look back to that 2017 season, and Mike Griffith had Ben Cleveland on the other night, and he mentioned that Rose Bowl, and I had sort of, Ben Cleveland had been around so long, I'd forgot that he was a starter for that Rose Bowl team, but for the majority of that season, he was not a starter.
That's right.
So
he was inserted right there near the end of the season and
after
had
the
big
Auburn
impact.
loss.
Yeah, for Georgia,
and I think he's one of the big reasons why they beat Auburn in that SEC championship game. So day one, and again, he's a veteran presence. I think when he was good last year, he flashed that, but he was a little bit inconsistent. So does he continue to become a more consistent offensive lineman for Georgia? And, game 1, that's an asset to have someone that has that experience, but by game 8, 9, when you've developed guys a little bit better, that experience I think might be mitigated a little bit.
And I'll just explain the reason why I ask that is because if you do have this big open question at left tackle, and I would say you have open question related to the center position there as well, you need your knowns. What is it the military talks about all the time about known knowns and known unknowns, things like that? You need your known knowns to be, really, really strong so that you can more easily make these transitions at the spots that are open.
Right now, I would say the only again, when we like Jamari Sawyer, we don't know which position he's ultimately going to end up at. I would say the only known we have on the offensive line right now is Warren McClendon at right tackle.
I mean, to me, body type wise, I won't make this comparison, but so much about Sawyer right now reminds me of what Isaiah Wynn used to be for Georgia. It's like he's obviously one of your 5 best. He may be your very best. It's just a matter of what position is he the most valuable for Georgia. There's so much about Sawyer that reminds me of Wynn right now. By the way, Wynn, even as kind of an undersized guy, finished his career as a very good tackle there for Georgia. Let me transition to something else. In my opinion on this may surprise you a little bit. We found out yesterday that Mikael Williams, very good 4-star defensive lineman, is going to postpone his upcoming commitment decision. And I actually take this as a good thing, even though had he gone when he was supposed to, I'm guessing he probably would have chosen Georgia. Now it may seem like, well, the door is open for somebody else. But the truth is, if the online chatter is true, the reason why he's doing this is related to, hey, maybe he gets a chance to start taking some visits again, do stuff like that. Honestly, normalizing the recruiting process again right now is more important for me than just getting a commitment from Mikael Williams, because if you get commitments from guys and then the door opens up for visits after that, then for every program in the country, the commits that you do have, you should look at all of them as very suspicious, because these guys want to and deserve a chance to go through the process. So, boy, because I think you've even heard, some other guys have kind of pumped the brakes here a little bit recently. I really, really, really hope all of this is a precursor to recruiting feeling normal again, and then let Georgia go into battle and recruiting with those rules in place once again. I'll take that right now over the pandemic-style commitments that have kind of bled into the start of the 2022 cycle.
Right. Christian Miller, also another 4-star defensive line target. He delays his commitment, which was originally supposed to be on Easter Sunday. Kojo Antwi is a name Georgia fans know in the recruiting. It sounds like he's pumping the brakes a little bit there. Yep. It's not a coincidence that I believe on Monday or Sunday it came out from Brian Fisher of Athlon Sports reported that at the NCAA's next meeting in April after the Final Four, they're going to have hard and firm rules on what the return to recruiting looks like. And I imagine these coaches are telling guys, hey, visits starting June 1st are going to be coming back. And so because of that, I think that's the reason why you're going to see the recruiting trail slow down a little bit, just given – with all that we've known about the 2021 cycle and the 2022 cycle to this point, guys sped up their recruitments because they knew those visits weren't going to necessarily be there. But now that you sort of see the light at the end of the tunnel, I think guys are more willing to say, hey, I'm going to slow down things for a little bit. I'll ignore the gazillion Zooms I have to do. And then starting June 1st, when I'm able to go visit and get a better look under the hood of these schools, I think that's when recruiting is really going to start to ramp up once again.
And I've said this over and over again. You look at the class of 2021, to me it's fairly obvious that Alabama sold, hey, we're big-time program, nobody's bigger, first-round picks, playoff, national championships, and frankly, if I was Alabama, I would have sold that too. There are players like, say, Dallas Turner and at the very end, Terrion Arnold, who that kind of recruiting seemed to really work with. To me, Georgia really leaned on the whole let's keep those dogs at home style theme, and Georgia cleaned up. If you look at the 24/7 Sports Composite ranking for the state of Georgia, Georgia cleaned up in those highest in-state rankings the way they probably haven't done before. It'll be interesting to see if the DNA then of these classes is somewhat different. Prior to 2021, Georgia was very content to recruit nationally because it knew that it sold a good product during its visits. You almost wonder if does the DNA of the class change a little bit if it's going to be conducted from, I guess, half the year from June until December with visits and a fairly normal process in place.
Right, and even you look at this current 2022 class, 7 of the 8 commitments are from the state of Georgia. So, and again, usually those 2019 and 2020 classes, they finished around only 8 or 9 in-state guys. Whereas there's the potential with this class for that number to creep into the mid-teens there. So it'll be sort of interesting to see how that all gets recalibrated and how Georgia goes about recruiting on a more national scale now that visits look like they're going to be coming back in some form and fashion.
So just to recap, whether it be Antwi, who's, I guess, been rumored to postpone, or Mikael Williams, who officially is, you mentioned, Krista Miller, whoever else, I will take a more return to normalcy over a couple of commitments that might not stick anyway.
Right.
If visits are opened up on the heels of that, I think that's actually a good development. Because this is one of those things where sometimes I think people think I'm not objective about anything. Like, objectively, I feel sorry for the recruits no matter where they're going to school. I mean, obviously, I'm a partisan. I want Georgia to have a great class, but Georgia's going to sign a great class no matter what. We've seen, years and years of that when it comes to recruiting. These guys deserve to take visits. If there's a healthy and safe way to do everything else related to college football, and it seems like there is, there ought to be a healthy and safe way to host visitors there as well. I just think this door being opened up to visits is, to me, it's overdue. But the fact that we may be on the verge of seeing that, I just take that as a good thing for them, and I hope that it allows them to make happy choices about where they want to play.
Right. You can't complain about the NCAA delaying the return to visits and hammering the NCAA in that aspect. And then when visits open up, you can't be like, well, Georgia was supposed to get all these guys, and now they're not because visits are opening up. What the heck? You can't have your cake and eat it too in this sense.
All right, so let me talk about the other big news that's been out there. Obviously, it kind of checks all the box for like sort of salacious soap opera drama. Rush Probst, who's quite a Google search in his own right, recorded, unbeknownst to him, making wild accusations against both Georgia and Alabama, and really even self-incriminating, at least allegedly, based on his time there at Hoover High School. We, for the most part, laughed about this when it popped up. I think it's entertaining. I don't think it's a big deal. I think non-Georgia fans wish that it was, but this fairly obviously, in my mind, was going to disintegrate here pretty quickly. Nick Chubb has come out strongly against really the strongest thing that Probst was recorded as saying, which is that Chubb got a substantial amount of money for returning to Georgia as a senior in 2017. Chubb, had a pretty forceful retort to all of that. I'm not scared by this. I'm not scandalized by this. This sounds like every conversation I've ever had after church on Sunday or wherever else. College football fans just kind of like to talk. We haven't really heard from you on this. What do you make of what has been probably the biggest story in the Southern college football world this week?
So do you want to know a fun fact?
I do.
The controversies tab on Rush Probst's Wikipedia page is longer than everything else on his page combined.
I hate that, man. That's tough.
I'm not surprised that Rush Probst finds himself in this mess. And actually, if you read into what's going on down there in Valdosta, it's an absolute mess right now. Yeah. And my buddy Jordan Hill put it best on Twitter, I think, the other day with Valdosta and the hiring of Probst. If you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes, and that's sort of what's coming to roost right now.
In fairness to them, and I won't get into all this, certainly, their program was in a good bit of turmoil before they hired Probst.
Oh, yeah.
If anything, they may have hired Probst to distract from a completely different scandal. They had nothing to do with him. And if you live down that south east part of the state, you may know more about that.
So, yeah, and again, I was actually, quite frankly, surprised that even Chubb came out and said, this is fake news. This isn't what you think it is. Just given, what we know about Nick Chubb. He doesn't say much a whole lot often. So the fact that he came out and I think said something about this says a lot about sort of the situation that has arisen from it. And again, this is just, it's the reality of college football. Every so often there's going to be a booster or someone who doesn't realize they're being recorded or whatnot, or I guess this may come from a deposition that got leaked. So it happens. We saw it happen with Tennessee. Dan Patrick said Georgia had gotten sloppy. Probably hadn't. Georgia put out a statement about that. I think this is all sort of maybe much ado about nothing.
Yeah.
If this isn't Rush Probst, if this is some generic South Georgia high school coach, this story doesn't have the legs that it necessarily has.
The story travels better because a lot of people have heard of Probst. But to be fair here, because we have a lot of non-Georgia fans that tune in and listen, we've been consistent across the board on this. I mean, obviously, we've had a great time with the McDonald story, but we said the day that came out, this probably isn't true, but we're going to mock Tennessee for it anyway. I mean, we've been very, very open and honest about that. So not only did we disbelieve the McDonald story, we have disbelieved this there as well. And as I told Mike Griffith yesterday, even the stuff that Probst said he personally did, I don't think that's true either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't think the Hoover Police Department was giving him drug money to run his program. I don't believe that's true.
Especially when you remember that Jake Garcia, who is technically one of the top 10 prospects in the state of Georgia, we talked about recruiting a little bit earlier. He counts in that seven of the 11 top recruits in the state of Georgia. Georgia got one of those 11, and one of the 4 they didn't get is technically Jake Garcia. You remember that Jake Garcia moved from California to Valdosta, Georgia, to go play for Probst initially before being ruled ineligible there. It doesn't surprise you all that much. He was, I think, pretty clearly trying to find some leverage to get some players to come play for him at Valdosta. And again, he's obviously an incredible football coach, but you look what happened to him at Hoover. You look how he fell out of favor there in Colquitt County. Trouble just happens to follow this guy.
Well, let me just finish with this, because to me, as I said on the show this week, the reaction to all of this is more interesting than the actual audio itself, because how specious, I guess, I believe the claims on the recording to be. There are a lot of non-Georgia fans who look and say, were they 6th in 2016, 3rd in 2017 in recruiting, number 1 in 2018, number 2 in 2019, number 1 in 2020. There are a lot of non-Georgia fans who say that in itself is proof that something's not quite – the results prove the nefarious behavior. But what I firmly believe to be true is what Kirby Smart is doing. This is really at the heart of what I believe bothers a lot of SEC fans. What Smart is currently doing right now is simply recruiting the way that Georgia should have always been recruiting. The unparalleled resources, Andy Staples has called this the best job in America, those unparalleled resources all of a sudden being used the way they're supposed to, and non-Georgia fans, I don't believe, kind of like that very much.
Right. Again, when Mark Richt was the head coach of Georgia, they were sort of there at the end, especially when he brought in Jeremy Pruitt. They were recruiting in that 7, 6, 5 range. All Kirby Smart has really done is come in and taken from going from that 6, 7, 5 range, which Dan Mullen in Florida can't even really get to,
right?
And taken that up to the 3, 2, 1 range, which again he was a big reason why Alabama had the recruiting success that it had at the beginning part of the decade. There, he was one of the best recruiters in college football. He is pretty clearly in the early parts of his staff. Recruiting matters. That's why you bring in a guy like Sam Pittman. That's why Del McGee is your running backs coach and the highest paid running backs coach in the country. So, and sort of tying this all together, to quote from Inglourious Basterds, if a story seems a little bit too true to be good, it probably is.
Yeah, that's probably right. Good stuff, Connor. Thank you very much.
Yep, as always, it was a pleasure.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, so my guess is you won't hear much more about this after all of that, referencing what Connor and I were just discussing, the Chubb accusation, the stuff related to, both Georgia and Alabama. By the way, it's also interesting that Georgia seems to be pretty quickly acting on all of this. We've heard from Hugh Nall. Athens Banner Herald had a quote from him, the former Dog player and Auburn assistant coach who was implicated by Probst. To my knowledge, Alabama hasn't done a thing. Alabama hasn't even rolled out of bed on this story, whereas, Georgia pretty quickly, kind of got involved in all of this. So my guess is you won't hear much more about this going forward. And as Connor and I were also speaking about to begin the conversation, I do think this spring is really fascinating, whether it be because of those potential rising stars you want to get more of a glimpse of, or at least hear that chatter on. It'll be interesting, with media limitations probably still in place for this upcoming spring, how much of that chatter does leak out. I always kind of think it's maybe coincidental, maybe not, that when some young guy is doing really well at Georgia practice early on, somehow we have a tendency to kind of find out about that. Somehow those leaks seem to work their way into the media. So maybe Georgia will help us out on some of that. And maybe, I don't know, Jalen Carter style, big hit or a George Pickens style catch, the kind of things that have seemingly escaped out from the very tight grip that Georgia has over information from practice. Maybe some of that will slip out here this spring. We'll get a chance to see a little bit more of what some of those big guys are doing for the Dogs, and of course getting ready for G-Day. And a lot of you hoping to be a part of that, and we'll kind of keep our fingers crossed that a lot of you are able to get inside that stadium, see that, and we can just really, I just find myself feeling really pretty optimistic right now when you see the way in which the vaccine rollout's kind of taking place, and when you see that people are starting to feel a little comfortable here, kind of getting back to normal. I know that my kids have been around my wife's parents again, and they've been vaccinated, and so they kind of feel good about all of that again. You are seeing some evidence either in your small social circle or your big the world we live in, of some things heading in a kind of a better direction for this upcoming fall, and it's kind of nice to see that G-Day may be a part of that coming up in April. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that all that continues to go well. By the way, I should also mention that as the Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley a moment ago, really good stuff from our friends at Kroger all the time. And by the way, speaking of kind of getting back to normal and having some fun, don't you think this year's Easter going to feel more fun and more exciting than last year's did, at least in a lot of ways? Well, you can get your Easter basket stuffed right now at your local Kroger with all of that. All the stuff to do that, that grass stuff that goes down there in the bottom, the candy that goes in there, everything else. Kroger.com/Easter to find out a whole lot more about that. It's Kroger.com/Easter to find out a bunch more about that. Get stocked up for Easter there at your local Kroger as we head towards that this time of the year. That's going to be a lot of fun. We appreciate Connor Riley being with us as a part of our Kroger Fresh Take on the program here today. Couple of SEC through stories to get to here for right now. Interesting fallout. Of course, we told you yesterday about Les Miles being out as Kansas coach, and the search now begins for a new coach. I've seen some kind of wild suggestions online about maybe some unorthodox choices that Kansas might pursue for that job. If you want more normal names, I know there's been some chatter as of late about a couple of SEC assistants, both of them there at Texas A&M. Maybe most prominently here on that, the fact that Mike Elko, the Texas A&M defensive coordinator, has shown up on some lists as a potential candidate as a replacement for Les Miles there. And Elko's been a head coaching candidate a number of places before. I do think he's one of the top coordinators in the SEC. This is a guy that's really transformed, I believe, the Aggies' defense, certainly made them more physical, kind of more fitting with what's going on around the rest of the SEC. He seems to be doing a really good job with that. I think it's been a pretty impressive thing to see. He's a head coach eventually somewhere. Could he be at Kansas this offseason? Obviously, if you're an Aggies fan, I think you're probably saying you hope that's not true because we're kind of after the coaching carousel has spun. Now we're getting ready to start spring practice, actually begin the season. To lose a defensive coordinator now would be kind of a pretty tough challenge. So I don't really quite know where Elko ranks on the list of potential Kansas head coaches, but he is certainly on that list right now. And the other name that's come up, Dennis Dodd, I believe, from CBS Sports, had this, Darryl Dickey, the Aggies offensive coordinator. I would say that Elko probably matters more than Dickey does within that Texas A&M coaching family because of the fact that Jimbo is such an offensive guy as it is. But that is indeed out there. Let me squeeze in one more thing real quick related to our SEC through. Saw where Emmanuel Henderson now has his date and time, the running back, five-star back out of Alabama for his upcoming commitment. 24/7 Sports had a story on this. It's going to be March 13th at 1 p.m. And the quote here, unfortunately, for Georgia fans who are interested, his high school coach is in here kind of listing all of the schools that he may go to. And you've heard certainly Alabama talk, Auburn talk, mentions LSU. And then at the end he says, and maybe Georgia. So if you're hoping for Henderson in the fold for UGA, the maybe Georgia at the end there from the high school coach of Henderson, maybe not a great sign related to all of that, but nonetheless, we'll make that your SEC through. And as we get ready to wrap up things here today, I also want to do something a little bit different for our Golden Shoe. We love doing Gatorade roll call. We love giving out our Golden Shoe in the program each and every day. But today, a little bit of breach of protocol here at the end because I want to honor a special group of people. One of the things you've been hearing me talk about a lot on the show as of late is some of the ways that we can kind of work against big tech who, when it comes to Facebook, things like that, they don't send out notifications quite as frequently as they used to or as commonly as they used to. So many people gravitating towards our DawgNation YouTube page. For those of you that are signing up to be a subscriber on DawgNation YouTube, really appreciate you doing all of that. Great chance for you to get all the video content here from DawgNation delivered right there to you. When you become a subscriber, you can get notifications set there. You'll know when we go live. So for those of you that have subscribed to the DawgNation YouTube page, for those of you that are going to subscribe, you are the Golden Shoe winner for today. By the way, Gator Hater Countdown, 234 days. Dogs get some revenge on Florida. We'll see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. and on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. Appreciate all of you being here today for the program, and we'll roll into some of your comments right now. I'll remind you that R.S. Andrews can show up, do great work for you, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can trust R.S. Andrews to do all of that. They'll take really good care of you. Air conditioning, of course, important right now as we head towards the spring. They got you covered on all of that. Let me start on YouTube first today. I'm going to try to go off the laptop today to see if this cooperates. YouTube is always fine. Sometimes the Facebook comments have been a little bit weird, but we'll try to do this off the laptop here today. Hope all of you are doing well. Hope you enjoyed hearing from David Pollack on the show today. That was a lot of fun. Wyatt Cruz had an idea. He said, since Jeff does before the hedges, when Mike Griffith had Eric Stokes and Ben Cleveland on, that should have been called after the hedges. That's a pretty good idea. Pretty good idea. I like that. Jay Shipe says, thanks for the daily Texas A&M update. In fairness, this was actual real news, Jay. In fairness, this was real news, but that's certainly funny. Thomas Van Santa, good to see you. Donnie Wilkerson checking in. Frank Patterson says maybe Salyer's position that week depends on who they play. Better defensive end, then he might play tackle. Bigger defensive tackle, then he might move into guard. That's interesting. I do think offensive line's a little bit of a chemistry continuity type thing. In other words, the continuity can potentially help your chemistry. I think there's a chance that's true. So, I'd be okay with a slow transition there to get past the Clemson game. But at a certain point, I'd like to see him settle into a position and then stay there. But I understand where you're coming from. Michael Porter liking those, talk about those lousy, stinking Gators. I like that there as well. Cody Ledoux says Hendo's all Bama. He knows the move. So Cody Ledoux feeling pretty confident about that. And I guess I understand where you're coming from. If I was a Bama fan, I guess I'd probably be confident about that there as well. Let's see what else. John Hendricks, on the subject of Alabama, says, no one disputes that Bama has had great seasons since Bear Bryant's days, and with all the championships, their fans would just be humble and enjoy the success, but not so. Karma will visit you guys. Boy, what has G. Grace done to stir y'all up today? Ooh, boy, what has he done to stir y'all up? There's no telling. Or maybe it's Cody today. Cody said he's on vacation. Maybe he's already gotten into the breakfast cocktails this morning. Maybe he's over here causing trouble. Scott Harris says, settle a discussion, 2020 Bama against 2019 LSU. Boy, that's a good question. I mean, the one thing, so I did a show the other day with a guy in Louisiana, and he brought up a really good point that I think is fair to discuss. It's awful hard to put Alabama easily over LSU when the 2020 Alabama team didn't have to do something that LSU did more than once. 2019 LSU had to go into tough road environments to win. And that's something that 2020 Alabama did not have to do because there weren't full stadiums. Now, I'm not saying that discredits or discounts Alabama's national championship, but if you want to say that Bama 2020 is not as good as LSU 2019, the absence of tough road games, I think, is a fairly decent argument on that point. So that's the one thing I will say is that the road LSU had to go through in 2019 may have been a little more challenging because you did have those tough road games. I mean, LSU won at Alabama, as a for instance, won at Florida as well. Actually, I can't remember. No, that game was in Baton Rouge. So maybe Alabama was the only tough road game they had. What are you saying? Connor's saying something. I can't hear through all of his masks.
LSU also won at Texas as well.
At Texas. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right.
I think it comes down – the answer to this question is Jalen Waddle healthy or not? If Jalen Waddle is healthy, if he's the one we saw against Georgia, I'm taking Alabama. If he's not, I probably take LSU.
That's a good point. Even though Devontae Smith just seemed to have two seasons, like once Waddle went down, Devontae Smith seemed to have his season and Jalen Waddle's season. He seemed to annex Jalen Waddle's productivity, which is as amazing as anything I've ever seen. So from that standpoint, I would say that because I've said before, I'd probably take Jamar Chase as a pro over Devontae Smith. But the season that Devontae Smith had for Alabama this year is unlike anything I've ever seen anybody have. So that's the one thing I will say. I'll take Chase as a pro prospect over Smith. I may take 2019 LSU as a team over 2020 Alabama. But I've never seen a wide receiver have a season like Devontae Smith had. In fact, I guess I probably would have thought it would be verging on impossible to do what he did a year ago. By the end of the season, I mean, he was Jordan or LeBron. I mean, everybody knew he was getting the ball and he was going to the rack, and there was just nothing you could do about it. I mean, that's just kind of what he became by the end of that season. So that's the one nod I'll give on the Bama side on this, is just the prolific nature of what what's his name, Devontae Smith did. All right, let me do a couple more, then I'm going to see if I can sift through this Facebook stuff over here. Ballard Sports Media says we need to put 2019 LSU and 2020 Bama on the field in the debate. That's one of those things I'm surprised that technology hasn't advanced much further than it did. Like when I was a kid, two things. So one day at the old Fulton County Stadium, this is what we did for entertainment back in the day, is IBM, and I'll give them a free plug because they were the sponsor of this, sponsored like a simulated game between the 57 Braves, who had won the World Series back in Milwaukee, and the 82 Braves that had won the division a couple years prior to this. And it was up on like the big screen, which back then was much bigger than the screen I have in the studio. And so somehow you had like Warren Spahn or Lou Burdett or whoever pitching for the Braves, Hank Aaron on one team, you had Phil Niekro, Dale Murphy on the other team, and they're just battling it out. And I forget which team won the game. I want to say maybe 82 won, just because they wanted to support their the Atlanta version of this. But you had like this simulated game, and ESPN did a thing like this where they had like a Super Bowl tournament back in the 80s of all the great teams of that time, and they would like splice in video from this team against that team, and they try to make it look together. I want to say that the mid 70s Steelers beat the 72 Dolphins to like win the tournament. But with all like the video game and simulated virtual reality technology we have now, how come we can't play a real game between 2019 LSU and 2020 Bama? Like that deep fake thing the other day from Tom Cruise. If somebody can do that, why can't we do a deep fake football game? I feel like people would watch that. So yeah, I agree with you on that. Thomas Tyson excited about Jermaine Burton. Looking forward to seeing him this year. I would agree with that. Jerry Dogs fan says UGA has the offense to get a lot of revenge this year. Can't wait for that. Yeah, people are excited about that, no doubt. Let me go over here and get some Facebook comments. Let's see if we can get these up and running. Facebook has been weird lately in terms of how these comments pull up. So let's see if we can get this going. All right, on Facebook, Mike Zambiasi says there's been very little talk about Probst here in Alabama. All that left when he went to Georgia. Maybe that is the case. Maybe Probst being in Georgia makes that a bigger deal here. He says just kick his behind to Florida and he'll be right at home. Yeah, I'm sure he'd fit in really well there. Jerry Popham says Connor's a very wise young man, very objective-oriented. He says comments about the rush of adrenaline from Valdosta made me feel better. So there you go. I'm sorry, Jerry, I could not make you feel better, though. John Paul Harris on the subject of Georgia being underachieving. And I don't mean that in kind of a harsh way. I mean, college football's hard. But, there were resources that Georgia probably wasn't marshaling as well as it could for a number of years. And I would say that Kirby Smart's kind of on his way to doing that. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little bit more patient about Georgia having not yet won a national championship, just because I feel like you can obviously see examples of them kind of moving in that direction. Matt Rugavina brings up such a good point. And we were doing the show at the time as podcast only. When Georgia won the overtime game in 2015 against Georgia Southern, there was all the celebrating. I remember being really disappointed in that. Just really, I felt like that was too much celebrating for too close of a game against Georgia Southern. I don't mean to bring up a bad point, but that was not a good moment for UGA. It was definitely not a good moment for UGA. I would agree with Matt Rukavina on that. Daniil Calvino checking in from California, just outside, I guess, Lake Tahoe, saying, I'm always cold here. I'm sorry to hear that, Neil, because the pictures sure do look beautiful from out there. Let's see what else. See, this is what's kind of, see, my comments have just kind of gotten hard to scroll. I don't really understand. There we go. Jerry also says he sees A&M having a good season. Brian Jones says 24/7 ranks Pickens as the number one returning receiver in the SEC. Boy, that's fun to think about. And as we said before, finding a way to pair another big receiver with Pickens, big numbers from at least two guys, I think a big step forward here. Keith Fold says that he hates that Georgia missed its home game against Tech, that Georgia always seems to get the short end of the stick when it comes to the scheduling stuff. So, Keith, I'm actually surprised more people didn't talk about that at the time. What the ACC is essentially doing is treating all of its schedule rotations as if 2020 didn't happen, which obviously, in this case, impacts the Georgia Tech game, and apparently Georgia chose to go along with it. But here's the weird part about this, is that, and I'm going to get deep in the weeds for like 9 seconds, then after that we'll move off this. So, on the one hand, it seems like Georgia didn't get its home game, but on the other hand, I had a memory from a few years ago, and I tried to go back and Google this, and I couldn't find proof to prove my point, that Tech wanted to switch the rotation of the Georgia Tech game, and Georgia didn't want to cooperate with him on that. Because as it stands right now, Tech has two permanent opponents that they get big ticket interest in. They have Georgia that they play every other year at home. They have Clemson that they play every other year at home. And as it stands right now, Georgia and Clemson are on the same year rotation for Georgia Tech. And so Tech obviously kind of wanted to split that up. So you're playing Clemson one year, you're playing Georgia the next year. So every year your season ticket includes one game that is going to sell out, obviously from a lot of the opposing team's fans. As it stands right now, you've got two of those games one year and obviously none of those games the opposite year. And my memory is, as I said before, I've tried to Google this and couldn't find proof to back this up, but my memory is that Tech asked Georgia for relief on that, and Georgia said no. But in a weird way, given the way that the Georgia home schedule is, where you've got currently, because of the Auburn thing from a couple years ago, you've got Tennessee, Auburn, and Georgia Tech on the same home rotation. That to me, it almost seems like it would have benefited both schools had the Tech game been in Athens this year, and you would have kind of been able to split some of your consistent Power 5 home games. As I said before, I know that's deep into the weeds. Most of you don't care unless maybe you're a season ticket holder, but that was the one thought I kind of had about this is that had they put the game in Athens this year, it would have potentially helped both schools with their home game balance going forward, but apparently nobody cares about that anymore. But that was something I thought about. Marshall Fleming says, please go back to the no targeting calls of 6 or 7 years ago. Bama or Florida could not have scored 21 points last year, and Smith at Bama would not have had 300 yards all year. So obviously I don't love the way the targeting call is enforced, even though I understand why it exists. But yeah, I mean, we've talked about, with Terrence Edwards last week, we talked about Thomas Davis. Thomas Davis is one of those guys at Georgia who is such a physical player. You wonder Greg Blue kind of was on that team with him and then existed at Georgia after him. Greg Blue would not have been able to do anything that he did. Thomas Davis was also a very physical player back in 2002. And, part of me does miss that physicality in the sport. It would certainly be a way to mitigate some of the offensive explosions you see in college football right now. Charles Felder says, who's the dark horse for freshmen to shine this year? Boy, that's a really good question. Is it too simplistic to say someone like Brock Bowers who may get a chance to do that? I don't know why Bowers on my name, on my mind right now. I would put Nyland Green on that list maybe a little bit because I think he may get his chance on that. How are those for names thus far? How do you feel about those? Steve Highland says the all-SEC schedule for Alabama would cancel out the lack of tough road games. You may be right. I don't know that I completely agree with that, Steve, but it's a fair point. Joey Robinson says, what team other than Bama and UGA do you think will have a good season this year? All the other commenters who like to, mock me will tell you that I'm going to say Texas A&M, and I am going to say Texas A&M. I think A&M's is a real, contender in 2021. I also expect a big bounce back year from LSU. I've said before, I think they're at the very least a top 15 team. And then beyond that, I'm guessing Florida's a top 25 team. But do I see another team in the SEC? Georgia, Alabama, A&M, LSU, Florida. Is there another SEC team besides that in the top 25? I think Auburn's going to have a hard time doing that. Auburn plays the SEC's West schedule, has Georgia, road game at Penn State. That's a tough schedule. I think Auburn's going to have a hard time being a top 25 team in 2021. Is there another top 25 team in this league beyond that? Some people might say Missouri. Maybe 5's enough. Maybe that's all you need. But I'd say you have LSU in the top 15. Alabama's a top 10 team. A&M's a top 10 team. Georgia's a top 10 team. And I think that Florida's going to try to scratch and claw its way into the top 25. But Florida's also got a tough schedule this year, too. Let's get a couple more. Mikey Watkins, good to have you back. He says his family's been really sick from COVID. I'm sorry to hear that. I know it's been tough. I mean, I hear about people who get it otherwise healthy, and they do get really sick. And for some people, it's been a hard thing to shake. And I'm really sorry about that. Really sorry about that. Matt Talley says, I got to step my meme game up if BA's giving that golden shoe to randos. Very funny stuff from Matt. Of course, you're always welcome to submit. I will say that it's easier for me to see them when they're submitted to me on Twitter. Easier for me to find them there at that point in time. Jermaine King upset that I started on YouTube. Matt Rukavina says, if you want to talk trash, go to YouTube. Objective analysis, you come here to Facebook. So that's very funny stuff. A couple more comments on YouTube. We're going to get ready to go after that. Thomas Tyson says he's looking forward to seeing Bama destroy Florida this year. Yeah, it could happen. Morgan Forrest says Watson is Clemson's best quarterback. I do think that Deshaun Watson could still be heard from in a big way in the NFL. I think it's hard to trade for him because A, I don't think Houston wants to, and B, there's a lot of salary cap implications because of how high Watson's salary is for 2021. But I'm a huge believer that Watson could still be a major story in the NFL and really, be a big-time winner. The one thing I don't think we do enough when it comes to pro football is I don't think we compare prospects across years very much. In other words, so when Joe Burrow comes out in 2019, this is the biggest quarterback of this year, and we have a tendency to treat him as the biggest quarterback of all time, but just because of the way the media landscape seems to grow. Following year, we're doing the same thing for, those guys. But I would love to hear more interesting analysis on how this quarterback compares to previous quarterback prospects. And, frankly, I would have said this going into last year's draft that someone like Watson, who had been in the league for a little while and, kind of, frankly, just hoping his team would give him some weapons and not trade away his wide receivers and whatnot. To me, a guy like that is still one of the best young quarterback prospects in this league. And frankly, I can still consider Watson to be pretty young. I think fairly quietly, the other thing about Trevor Lawrence, too, is fairly quietly, Lawrence had a great freshman year. I think he was really good this past year. But, some of his numbers in 2019 weren't necessarily extraordinary if you're going to kind of compare him to, like, all-time great types. Jalen Jackson says, how would you feel about Justin Fields in Atlanta? Jalen, I want the Falcons to draft Justin Fields for a number of reasons. I'll be disappointed if they don't. Now, there are mock drafts out there that may suggest Atlanta doesn't get a chance to do that. I saw one the other day that Atlanta stuck with Trey Lance. I've told you before, I'm not a draft Nick. I don't pretend to be a draft analyst. I don't want Trey Lance in Atlanta. I have no interest in that whatsoever. That does not excite me at all. I want the Falcons to draft Justin Fields and would be furious if they had a chance to and didn't. If a team like Carolina trades ahead of Atlanta and takes Fields, there's not a whole lot you can do about that because, I don't know that I think Fields is enough of a sure thing that I would say Atlanta should trade from 4 to 3 to get there. Probably not having to worry too much about the first or second pick on that. I don't know that Atlanta needs to trade up to get Fields, but drafting him if he's there at number 4, I'd be disappointed if they didn't. And as Mel Kiper has suggested, that Atlanta might trade to 2 to get Zach Wilson. I liked Wilson in college. I think he has a chance to be a very good pro, but I would be disappointed if Atlanta traded up for Wilson when you might could have sat pat at 4 and taken Justin Fields. I enjoy Fields. I think Fields would be very popular in Atlanta. This is a city that wants, celebrity type players, and Fields being a big name that grew up in the Atlanta area would kind of give you some of that vibe. Atlanta needs to the Falcons organization needs to reboot itself. This team has worn out its welcome with many Falcons fans, and I think that Justin Fields would re-energize all of that. P. Rich says he agrees if the Falcons don't take Fields at 4, then trade back and get more picks. Simple as that. Yeah, I mean, and in fairness, this may be one of those drafts because it is so quarterback heavy near the top that having the chance to trade back, maybe you do have more of a chance for that than you sometimes typically might. Christy says, I want to see Fields succeed. Keep him out of Atlanta. So Christy apparently buying into the Atlanta curse there on that. Michael Porter mentioning he calls him Urban Liar. Yeah, I think the Meyer experiment down in Jacksonville is going to be really, really interesting for a number of reasons. I've always had a little bit of affection for the Jaguars organization because they're a little bit of a, kind of a underdog type organization. I spent a lot of time down there in that North Florida area, and so I like the area. I'd love to see the Jaguars do well. This is their chance, right? I mean, this is an organization they've been playing. I think this past year were scheduled to play 2 games in London. So they're going to get 6 home games prior to the pandemic. So that gives you kind of an idea of just how different they are than a lot of other NFL franchises in terms of their connection to their local market. With Meyer at coach, with Trevor Lawrence coming in at quarterback, this is their chance to really build something. And I'll be very curious to see if it happens, because if it doesn't happen with Meyer and Lawrence, you kind of wonder, is it ever going to happen? Thomas Van Santa making a comment. He may be referencing Isaiah Wilson there. Yeah, I mean, I hope the change of scenery does Wilson well in Miami. I guess we've seen guys use that second chance before. Maybe he'll get a chance to do that. I think it's hard. I mean, obviously, this is a problem we'd all love to have. But I think it's really hard to be given that huge, huge amount of money at such a young age. And it's just, for some people, a very difficult thing to live with. I mean, you've heard the old adage before. I don't think this is like a dumb thing. It's like, plenty of people can handle failure, but handling success sometimes is really hard. I think in Wilson's case, handling the success that comes the way of a first-round pick, life-changing money, I think that does weird things to your brain sometimes. And so I hope whatever Wilson's dealing with, I won't pretend to be an expert on that, but he's clearly dealing with something as self-destructive as his behavior has been. Whatever he's dealing with, I hope he gets it figured out, and I think it's not too late for him to do that. Change of scenery can sometimes help. Lucy Bowers-Boykin said, I've said these things about A&M before. Oh, Lucy, be very careful. Be very careful. You're going to force me to go back into the annals of history here and let all of you know, and Connor's going to roll his eyes when I say this, I have correctly picked the winner of the SEC West for the last 4 years. So that's why I'm holding out and making my pick right now, because I've got a lot of credibility on the line with this. I'm a bit of a sure thing when it comes to, for whatever reason, that particular pick is one that I have a tendency to do well with. And as far as what I've said about A&M, I called them a one-loss team last year. That's what they turned out to be. I said they'd finish just behind Alabama, and they did. But, Lucy, be very, very careful here. My prediction on A&M for last year turned out to be quite true. Quite true. Let me get 1 or 2 more. We're going to get out of here. Or not. Jermaine King says, I don't like the Facebook crowd anymore. That's not true. We've spent a lot of time on Facebook here today. I am having a hard time on my Facebook comments for whatever reason. Let's see if we can get anything else before we go. Oh, Lord. Sorry, Facebook. I am having a little bit of issue with these comments. For some reason, my scroll's not working quite as well as it used to. Let me see if I can get back out and get back in, and we'll get ready to go after that. And of course, if you want to just leave and not endure all this, the show's essentially done anyway. But either way, I'm glad to have you here. And let's see if we can get 1 or 2 more before we get out of here on the Facebook side of things. Mike Zambiasi says the only good thing about playing Tech in Atlanta is being close to the varsity. Yeah, I've kind of changed my varsity order over the last year or so. Been very happy to do so. I now go double cheeseburger with chili. So it's like bun, some cheese, chili. I love the varsity's chili, and then 2 patties. I get 2 of those. That's my varsity order now. Very, very happy. That's my new varsity order. Really enjoy that. Eric DeVornsey says, I could see Big Ben moving up in the draft after the combine. You could see that as well. Big guy in great shape. NFL teams typically like him. Or like guys like that. I'm not really quite sure what round I could see him being taken in, but I've always felt like Cleveland had a chance at a nice career. Jimmy Durham says, I think the center position is the key to this offense, the offensive line being successful. Got to make sure everyone picks up their assignments. Big games in the past. This has hurt us. I do think that center is going to be important for Georgia this year. I think you're exactly right about that. Anything else before we go? Maybe not. Let me just get out of here. Hey, don't forget to check out the AJC online, ajc.com, for your Atlanta news now. Great chance to stay up to date on everything happening in your world, and there is a lot going on in your world if your world includes the Atlanta area. As said before, vaccine rollout, continue to follow all of that. Really good video coming up with the Atlanta area school superintendents. The various systems have taken very, very different tacks as far as the return to school this past year and kind of how all of that is going and what the health and safety outlook is for the future for these big systems here in our Atlanta area. Really good video thing on that today. Make sure you check out ajc.com. You can find out more details about that. What else? SEC basketball tournament getting ready to get going. Good coverage of that, ajc.com. Also, a really fun new dinosaur experience is on its way for kids here in the Atlanta area. You can find out more about that there as well. And Center for Puppetry Art's got some really fun ticketing options. By the way, great place to take some youngsters there as well. All kinds of fun stuff. And kind of an interesting move yesterday. I guess this wasn't totally unexpected, but the Falcons did not put the franchise tag or anything on Keanu Neal, the safety. So he's entering the open market. Has dealt with a ton of injuries, of course. So that's a story worth following there with all of that. All right, so that's Atlanta News Now, ajc.com. Here for us, make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online at rsandrews.com for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. R.S. Andrews will take good care of you on all of that. Find them online at rsandrews.com. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Thanks to all of you for being here on our R.S. Andrews Cool Down today. And I'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. We'll talk to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.